Good afternoon. My name is Kat Roskovics, and I'm going to be your host for this week's QuickBooks Enterprise Deep Dive webinar. So today we're going to cover templates. So we're going to look at accessing and managing templates. We're also going to look at ways that we can customize those templates, and then some preference checks as well. All right, so I've just got a sample company file open here. And first thing we're going to look at is how we access the templates list. So up at the top, I'm going to go to lists and templates. Now, one thing that you can also do if we're on, let's say, an invoice, and we want to pick a different template for this invoice to use, we can access all of our invoice templates here. Same thing if we were on, let's say, an estimate, right? And we wanted to change what estimate we're using, we have some other options here as well. I'm going to go back to that list. And then from here, I've got it sorted by type, but we can also sort it by name if we wanted to see. You can see here when you start a QuickBooks file, you get quite a few kind of standard templates that are included. One thing when we're going through and customizing these with our clients is we want to inactivate the ones that we're not going to use, just so they don't show up in those lists that I was showing before. If we're like on an estimate and we click that down arrow, we don't want them to see the ones that we're not going to be using. So some of these default ones, if they're not going to be in use, you can definitely make them inactive. Some of them, they're ones that you created, you can delete them, but you can see here, this attorney's invoice, it's there to say we can't delete it out of our list, but we can definitely make it inactive. So then if we wanted to take a look at all of our invoice templates here, and we wanted to create a specific one, we usually like to start with an existing one that's kind of close to, you know, what we're really looking for. So if I take a look at this Intuit product invoice here, and as soon as I start doing any sort of additional customization on it, because that's one of the Intuit default templates, it's going to force me to make a copy of it. And then it's going to be called, let me just go back here, copy of Intuit product invoice. So if I wanted to make it super clear to everybody that that's the one I wanted them to use, I can also come in here and rename this template, right? All I'm doing is double clicking on that template, clicking on manage templates, and then I'm just going to modify the template name. So I'm going to say Fourlane invoice. Then I can say okay. And now I've got my invoice, and this is going to show me a little bit of a preview over here. So we're going to talk about our basic customization, which is what we have here, and then we're going to go into some more of the more advanced customization that you can do on your templates. So first thing we always hear, right, we want to make sure our logo's on there. Branding is super important, especially these days, so we want to get that added on. Some clients will have their full, you know, I've got this file name is actually Fourlane webinar file, but you can modify this. So if we didn't want to have our company name on there, as an example, we can modify that in a second to kind of get that a little bit more in alignment. And then if for some reason you didn't want that logo to show on your template, you can always you know, check that box. Or if there is another specific logo you wanted to show on a template, I've had some clients that they have, you know, maybe two different DBAs that are functioning out of the same file. So they might have, you know, Fourlane 1 and Fourlane 2. And so they might have two different logos and they have different templates so that when they invoice their customers, they look like they're coming from two separate companies when in fact they're housed in one company file. So that's just a quick tip on a workaround there. So we can also apply a color scheme. Now the default one that's selected here is just black, but there are some other ones that are available. So if I wanted to say blue, and it's just going to update and give me a little bit of a preview over here. and we can always switch it back if we want to. If we wanted to change the font for a specific box that's on here, you can select change font, and if for some reason I wanted that one to be maybe a little bit different and a little bit bigger, I can modify that right here from this additional customization. Now it's only going to have, you know, some of the available fields that are on here rather that we can customize, but we'll look at some of the other ones that we have as well in a second. But if we wanted to change the font for, you know, multiple fields on here, we have to go through each one of those and change that font. So if we wanted to change our labels font to that same kind of situation, we can do that as well. Now, if there is other information that you don't want to see on here, or that you do want to see on here, right? If I want to go back and add my company name back, if I wanted to put in my phone number, which I don't think I have my phone number set. Oh, there it is in this file. We're going to look at how to move that in a second. But if this information is not showing up correctly, then you want to go to this update information, and then it will pull up that company information area. You can also get there, I'm just going to back out of this real quick, by going company and my company. That's also going to pull up that same company information window as well. All right, so we've talked about how to add some basic customization and some fields, change a few fonts. You also have the option to add some stamps. So if there is a status like void, pending, received, paid, etc., you can add that stamp. If you want it to print a past due stamp, so if you've created an invoice and it has not been paid and it is past the terms that you have set on that transaction or for that customer, you can select to do that. More and more of these are being emailed out. Sometimes that's effective, sometimes it's not with that past due stamp, so it just kind of depends. I'm going to leave that turned off for now. And then if we wanted to see, right, this preview is pretty good, but if we wanted to really see like a bigger view, maybe to zoom in on, etc., we can do that as well. So now we're going to dive into our additional customization. So I'm going to pick on that guy. And this is where, you know, getting the appropriate information for reporting is really going to be helpful, right? There's really two keys to some of the field data that we have in QuickBooks. One is that it tells our customer, right, PO number as an example. If we put our customer's PO number on here, then hopefully it's going to make them it's going to make it easier for them to pay us, because we are going to have that printed out. We're going to send them the invoice, or if we're emailing it, etc. They're going to see that PO number. They're going to be able to match that up to their system, and it should be pretty straightforward from there. Some of the other fields we might want to have on our invoice, we may want them going to our customer, like sales rep as an example. Maybe our, you know, customer, we don't mind if they see that information, they know the rep that they're working with, etc. But we also have the option on here to have it on the screen, but not on our print copy. So if there were custom fields that we had set up on the customer record, which are going to show up here, that we wanted to print on, or not print, rather, show on the screen when we're entering in an invoice, but we didn't necessarily want that information printing, then we can select that custom field box and select the screen and not the print. One thing with custom fields that you want to kind of be a little bit careful about is we really want to be strategic in how we're setting those up. I know we've either had another webinar or we'll have a webinar soon to go into more depth about custom fields, but being strategic in how you have those set up, looking at how they're going to impact some of the reporting is really important as well. I'm going to actually go ahead and just real quickly here set up a custom field on my customer record so that we can see that. And then maybe we want to have that field. And I'm going to say any type of text. I'm going to make it required on transaction. So this is another important thing that we'll talk about in a second. If it's required on list, that means we have to have it filled in before it'll allow us to save a list record. If we have it on transaction, that means it's going to require us to fill it in if we're entering in an invoice, regardless of whether or not it's printing on that invoice. So that's where, if we're going to be doing any reporting off of that custom field, we really want to make sure that we have it required. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm just going to enter in a company here. Let's get that one in quickly. Okay. So going back to our Fourlane invoice and looking at our additional customization. So now we can see that that priority custom field that I created is available to add to my invoice template. It would also be available to be added to other customer sales transaction forms like estimates, sales orders, or if you call estimates quotes or proposals, et cetera, right? It's all on that estimate transaction. You would be able to add this custom field there as well. And that custom field is going to show up here in this area. So if I want to say screen only maybe for that one, because I want it to be on the screen, but I may not, maybe this is a sales order and I want it to be a lower priority than some of my other sales orders. Probably don't want my customer seeing that information. So I would put it just on the screen. So it's kind of an internal way to track it. Some of the other fields on here, you can see that you can have them print, like account number as an example. So your customer's account number, but we don't have that as an option on the screen because it doesn't allow us to actually edit that account number from a transaction. We'd want to edit that from the customer record. So we can have it, again, on the screen, but not, or on the print, but not looking at it on the screen. And then if we have any sort of sales order number that we want to carry over, you can also change the titles of these. So sometimes we want to call an invoice something else. Sometimes we might want to call an estimate, right, a bid or something along those lines. So you can modify this. So if I just put ABC here as an example, it's going to just modify it up here. I'm going to change that back to invoice. I've seen examples of like pro forma invoices as an example. I've seen that used. And then if you wanted to rename really any of these fields, you can here. And that covers kind of this header area here. That would also include these fields here. And you can see when I was going through and modifying some of those, I was getting that pop-up that there's, a layout issue. We're going to take a look at that in a second. Now, if we come over to our columns, that is going to be this area down here. And these have to do with our line items that are on our invoice. So it looks like we have LC number set up as a custom field on our items list. So that might be a thing that we want to be able to report on. So we've got to at least have it on the screen. Does not have to be on the print, but it's got to be on the screen. And then again here, if we wanted to rename any of these fields, like part number as an example, it's going to adjust that column header if that column header is set up on our forms. Now here we can also change the order of them. So if I wanted to make a change there, I can change the order of how these fields are organized on here. If I wanted to change and have some of them maybe not show up or show up, I'm going to put those back. I can do that as well. Now you can see some of them are required, right? We have to have our item on the screen because we want to be able to add line items to our invoice. We have to have our amount on the screen because we want to be able to add those as well. So there are some that you can't take off, but you can take all of them on or off of the print copy if you want to. Now this progress columns here is really for sales orders. You might also have progress columns on progress invoices if that's part of your workflow in QuickBooks. So this just gives you some options to print based on a sales order, what's been ordered, what was previously invoiced, what's been back ordered, coming from when you generate that invoice from a sales order. This footer information down here is again just optional. If you have any sort of message in your customer message list that you want to show up on your invoice, we're looking at an invoice here, so transaction that's going out to a vendor or customer, you can have that either show or not show, print or not print. If there's been any payments or credits made to an invoice, if we wanted to show their total balance or the total balance on a job, if we're using jobs or sub-customers, right, in QuickBooks, those are all options as well. And again, you can change the title of those. Now, if you have a message that you want to be on all of your invoices, and that's where we're going to look at more putting it on our layout designer so that we don't have to select every time we create an invoice, we don't have to select putting it on, putting that message on there. So right here, and this is potentially pretty small on your side, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here so we can see it a little bit better. So right here is where that account number one that I added was kind of broken up from the other fields. So you can see that I'm just kind of dragging and dropping these around. If you click on a particular field, you can shrink that down if you want to, or make it bigger. Maybe we don't want PO number quite that small. What I'm trying to do right now is just make some room for that account number field. So I'm going to just kind of move this over. I'm going to move this over. You can see this layout designer is very easy to use and modify, especially recommending that you use that zoom in feature because that definitely makes it a lot easier for everybody to see. So I'm just going to drag and drop these around a little bit. And now it looks a lot better, right? We don't have any fields overlapping or any of that kind of stuff. Now, one of the other things that we can do here is if I wanted to add a specific image, right, that's only going to be on this invoice, I can do that. I can also add a text box. So let's say that, like we were talking about having a customer message, right, print as an automatic thing. So I could put "have a nice day" on here. And I can also say how I want that to appear, right, kind of going to Excel. If I want it left, right, or center, I can pick how I want that to show, how I want it to be, the justification to be either top, bottom, or center. I can also choose if I want to have a border on that or if I wanted to have a thicker border. I'm going to say no border. If there needs to be any sort of background, so if we wanted that text, as an example, to be white, but we wanted our background to be black for some reason. And that's pretty small, so let's click back into there again, and I'm going to pick a different font. And let's just make this a little bit bigger. So now you can see that I can drag and drop this around where I want to. And then even from this screen here, we can also just delete off entirely. So if we didn't want the total to show for whatever reason, that box that I just deleted was actually our customer messages box. So we can take that off. I can make this bigger. So there's a lot of additional customization that you can do here. If you wanted, you know, these headers as an example to be all black with white font, you could do that. So this just gives you a lot more granularity into, you know, what you can do and ways that you can change things. We also have some data fields, right? So you saw me take off customer message. If I wanted to add that back for some reason, I can bring it back just by going to that add dropdown and saying data field. And then it gives me a list of the fields that I have available. I'm going to take that guy off again, and I'm going to say okay. Right, so now we've got our invoice completely customized. I'm just going to say okay. And then let's go ahead and just add our logo back just for grins. And then I'm just going to say okay. Now from here, right, if I want to make sure that invoice is the one that is used whenever we're creating an invoice, I might come in here and make the rest of these invoice ones inactive. I'm going to make a couple of them inactive now. Let's see, product invoice, professional invoice. Oops. One other thing I wanted to add is, you know, as you're going through, if you're turning on, let's say, classes and you want the class to print, or you're turning on inventory sites, you want that to print, just make sure that the alignment on any of your forms that need to have that information, like your invoice, your sales order, potentially your purchase order, etc., that the alignment on there doesn't get messed up when you're adding some of that additional information from preferences. Okay, so now that I've got my Fourlane invoice here, if I go and create an invoice, you can see I've got Fourlane invoice up here. I do have a priority, so if I just say low, I can pick on ABC company, classes in here. And then my part number, I'm just going to pick a widget here. I don't have enough to sell. And then I'm going to say save. Now let's just take a look at a print preview of that. And what I wanted to show is, you know, we have low on that invoice, but it is not showing on our print copy that's going to go out to our customer. So that is all about invoices. Now, the templates for sales order, estimate, and also purchase order are going to work very similarly. You're going to see those same types of screens. You just might have to modify them in a little bit different ways. The menus and everything are going to look exactly the same, but we're going to be looking at probably different information on a purchase order than we would be looking at on an invoice. So we might have our manufacturer's part number show on our purchase order. We might have custom fields set up for our vendors specifically that we want to be able to see on those purchase orders. So those are just a little bit of the ways that they're different between transactions. And then there's one other quick tip I wanted to share. And if there's any questions, we'll definitely be responding to those after the webinar today. I'm going to go into, so edit preferences. This is a company preference, and I'm going to click on sales and customers here. Now this is where we have sales orders turned on, but I wanted to make sure to show everyone there is a place in here that you pick your default template that is going to show up for a packing slip and a pick list. So we have one default. You don't get to when you're on a sales order. So I'm just going to leave those two as the defaults for right now. When we're on a sales order and we go to print pick list, this is going to show, okay, So if I do a preview on this guy, this is the default pick list that's going to show up. So we can have one default pick list. We can definitely have different forms, but if you want it to go and show up or be the template that's used when you go to that print pick list, you have to make sure that you set that in your preferences. Okay. So now we've gone over everything we're going to talk about with templates. All right. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.